The first thin blade of morning sunlight sliced through the towering glass windows of Aztec Towers, scattering across the polished marble floors like a silent spotlight. The city was still rubbing sleep from its eyes. The streets below were quiet, wrapped in a cool, bluish haze that always lingered before the morning rush. Inside the massive corporate building, the air felt frozen in time. Vacuum hums, distant elevator chimes, and the faint scent of lemon disinfectant were the only reminders that the day had begun. And in that early hush, long before the world demanded anything from him, a single dad named Evan Cole pushed his cleaning cart toward the private executive wing, an area practically forbidden for people like him, a place where power breathed through floor-to-ceiling glass, where expensive leather chairs and framed global awards whispered stories of wealth and influence. But today, for reasons he couldn't explain, his steps slowed as he stood before the heavy oak door of a woman everyone whispered about in awe, fear, or pity. Behind that door sat Ariana Lock, the 28-year-old billionaire whose brilliance had once made headlines, whose presence once turned silent rooms electrified. But ever since the tragic accident that severed her spinal cord and shocked the nation, she had retreated into this office like a shadow behind a fortress. And as Evan paused outside her door, a strange certainty washed over him, a certainty that crossing that threshold would alter his life and hers, in a way neither of them could foresee. Something in the lighting, in the stillness, in the ghost of exhaustion resting on his shoulders told him the moment had arrived. The moment that would tear open two broken worlds. He raised his hand to knock, but before he could, the door cracked open from inside. Ariana Lock looked up at him with eyes cold as glass, eyes that reflected neither anger nor welcome, just numbness, the kind that comes from living too long with pain. And without fully knowing what pushed him, Evan stepped forward and spoke the words that made her first laugh in disbelief, and then crumble into tears. "I'll help you walk." They were reckless words, impossible words, the kind that would have gotten him fired if anyone heard. But they came from something deeper than reason, from the place inside him that knew what it felt like to lose everything and still cling desperately to hope. Before diving deeper into the journey that followed, he managed a small breath, wondering if he had just destroyed his life. But a flicker, just a flicker, of life passed across Ariana's face. That tiny spark was enough. Evan Cole had never imagined his life would lead him here, juggling two jobs, raising his 7-year-old daughter Harper alone, and carrying grief so heavy it had taken root in his bones. His wife, Lila, had been his anchor, his soft landing place, his reminder of gentleness when he felt overwhelmed. But 3 years earlier, illness swept her away like a thief, swiftly, mercilessly, without giving him time to realize he was losing her. Their small-town clinic had fought, but the resources weren't there. Evan had sat by her bedside holding her hand as she whispered her final apology for leaving him to raise their daughter alone. Since that day, life became a rotation of survival. His days started before sunrise, with Harper wrapped around his neck like a sleepy koala, murmuring small questions about breakfast or dreams. His nights ended long after she drifted off to sleep in their tiny apartment, her soft breathing grounding him when the world felt too hard. He worked as a delivery driver from noon to evening, and at dawn he cleaned the marble floors of Aztec Towers, the same towers Ariana Lock once roamed with unstoppable energy. The janitorial job wasn't glamorous. Sometimes it felt like the world walked across the floors he polished without ever acknowledging he existed. But it was steady, and steady meant rent paid, food on the table, medicines for Harper when she caught colds, and school fees that squeezed his budget like a vice. Steady meant a future he prayed he could still build. Every day, he passed Ariana's office. Every day he tried not to glance through the narrow glass panel on her door. But something about that office always pulled at him. Not curiosity, not awe for her money or reputation, It was the quietness, the loneliness that oozed from the space as though grief lived inside those walls. He felt the weight of it like a familiar echo. Ariana Lock had been unstoppable once. Videos still floated online, clips of her striding across tech summits with sharp heels and sharper intellect, commanding applause, closing deals worth billions with a single firm handshake. She was fierce, brilliant, a storm in human form. But the car crash had taken more than her ability to walk. It had stolen her independence, her fire, and that part of her that believed she could shape the world. The world saw her wealth. Evan sensed her emptiness. The day everything changed began without fanfare, just as quietly as a page turning. Evan was mopping the marble floor in the executive hallway, while Harper sat nearby on a small, foldable chair he carried with him. She was slightly feverish that morning, and daycare wouldn't take her. So she came along to the quietest shift of his day, bundled in her pink sweater, coloring butterflies and flowers in her sketchpad. Harper rarely caused trouble. She was gentle, thoughtful, a child whose heart understood tenderness the way other children understood giggles. As fate would have it, Ariana opened her office door at that exact moment. The quiet click startled even the silence. She rolled out slowly in her sleek, matte black wheelchair, an elegant machine that still somehow looked like a cage. Her hair was perfectly brushed, but her face was pale, tired, expressionless. Harper, sitting on her little chair with crayons scattered around her, looked up at Ariana with a bright, innocent smile. A smile untainted by hesitation or pity. Ariana froze. It was the first time in months someone had looked at her that way. Adults avoided her eyes now, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of confronting her disability, or afraid of her status. Some offered forced courtesies, stiff nods, or sympathy she never asked for. But no one smiled at her like she was simply human. "What's your name?" Ariana asked softly, her voice dusty from disuse, fragile around the edges. "Harper," the little girl chirped. "Do you like flowers?" She held out her drawing of bright red tulips. Ariana didn't speak for a long moment. Her eyes glistened, her throat tightened, and she slowly rolled back into her office without saying another word. Almost as if the contact had overwhelmed her, Evan watched her go, stunned by the emotion that had flickered across Ariana's face. Later, unable to shake the moment, Evan knocked gently on her door, not as an employee seeking attention, but as a father wanting to thank someone for showing kindness to his child. The door opened, and he stepped into a room so hollow it felt like sorrow soaked the corners. Ariana looked at him, and for the first time he saw the truth behind the billionaire persona. She was exhausted, broken, fragile in ways money could never protect. Something inside him moved, something raw and instinctive. Without thinking, without planning, he spoke the words that would change everything. "If you're willing, I think I can help you walk again." Ariana stared at him, stunned. Then a short, jagged laugh escaped her lips, half disbelief, half bitterness. The kind of laugh someone gives when hope has betrayed them too many times. "You're a janitor," she whispered. "I've had world-class specialists, surgeons, neurologists, some of the best minds on the planet work on me. They all said the same thing. What makes you think you can do what they couldn't?" Evan didn't back away. He didn't shrink from the magnitude of her pain. "Because I won't treat you like a patient," he said gently. "I'll treat you like someone worth fighting for." Something inside Ariana cracked, something she had carefully cemented shut. Over the next few days, she found herself watching Evan through her office window. She watched the way he knelt beside Harper to tie her shoelaces, the way he listened when the little girl excitedly described her drawings, the calm, quiet strength he carried, the dignity in his silence. He didn't seek praise. He didn't beg for attention. He simply existed with a gentleness she had almost forgotten people could possess. Finally, one afternoon, as sunlight poured softly into her office, she called out to him. Her voice trembled just slightly. "If you're serious, she whispered as he stepped inside. "Show me." And so they began. Evan wasn't a doctor. He never pretended to be. But after Lila fell ill, he had spent months learning physical therapy techniques from books, free online courses, and nurses who had taken pity on him. He had studied how muscles responded to pressure, how nerves could sometimes be retrained, how the human body could surprise even the most seasoned specialists. He had no machines, no high-tech medical equipment. What he had was patience, determination, compassion. Under his guidance, Ariana's rigid legs were coaxed into slow but steady motion, stretched, massaged, aligned, and awakened inch by inch. He talked to her during every session, his voice low and comforting. He told her stories of Harper's innocence, of Lila's courage, of grief, and what it steals and what it leaves behind. With him, for the first time since the accident, she felt human again. Not a billionaire, not a broken case, just a woman trying to reclaim her life. Progress was slow, invisible, the kind you have to believe in before you can see. But then, one bright afternoon, Evan asked her to try lifting her leg. The room was warm with golden sunlight stretching across the floor. Evan held the support frame steady while Ariana closed her eyes, focusing on the trembling breath in her chest. Everything inside her screamed not to hope, not to risk disappointment again. But she tried anyway. And then, like a spark catching dry grass, her leg twitched. A faint movement, barely there, but real. Evan's voice cracked. "Ariana, you moved!" Her eyes flew open. She gasped, covering her mouth as tears spilled uncontrollably. Shock, fear, hope. Every emotion she had buried came crashing at once. "I didn't imagine that," she whispered, trembling. "You didn't," he reassured her. "You did it." For the first time in 2 years, she believed her life wasn't over. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something gentler, brighter. Evan kept showing up. Harper continued bringing her sunshine into Ariana's office with her crooked drawings, silly questions, and unfiltered giggles. And Ariana, slowly, carefully, began piecing herself back together. She started speaking more, smiling more, laughing in small, hesitant bursts that surprised even her. Employees noticed. The woman who once lived behind walls of silence now greeted people again. Then came the day Evan stepped back from the support bar and whispered softly, "Try." The room was so quiet, Ariana could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ribs. Her hands clutched the parallel bars. Her legs trembled under her weight. Sweat gathered at her brow. Every muscle protested. But slowly, painfully, beautifully, she rose. On her own, her knees buckled and she collapsed into Evan's arms, sobbing into his shoulder. He held her tightly, steadying not just her body but her breaking heart. "You kept your promise," she cried. "You kept fighting." "And I'll keep fighting," he whispered. As Ariana's strength grew, so did her bond with Evan and Harper. She began inviting Harper to sit in her office after school. She began opening up about the accident, about the nights she cried alone, about the fear that no one would ever see her as whole again. And Evan listened. Always listened. For the first time in her life, Ariana felt truly seen, not as a billionaire, not as a burden, but as a woman learning to stand again. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew the truth. Fate hadn't just sent her help. It had sent her a family. If this story made you feel something today, remember this simple truth. Hope wins, always, even when the world breaks you, even when the darkness thickens, even when walking feels impossible. Ariana Lock had lost everything once, but through the unlikeliest person, a humble janitor with gentleness carved into his soul, she learned to stand again. Not just on her feet, but in her heart.